In soiled aquariums, grimed by time, giant mud crabs, their kingdoms wired. Watch their last sun carving, sweeping silhouettes from the fruit bats, swimming off to who knows where. The dealers deal their wares here to the drowning, arriving in European cars, quiet faces down narrowed lanes, craving a methadone cure. Vincent deals here, he travels my tram with Jenna, who is always by his side, her floating eyes missing. The rest the drugs pass in Mandarin and Thai. We pass $2 shops selling stuff that simply won't last long enough to let anyone know that any of us were ever here. But here we are on the 109, the rich, the poor, and all of us lost in a history of moments filled with every color that we've been so far. I've seen everyone standing so old people can sit. I've seen everyone helping mothers lift their prams. I've seen everyone, and I mean everyone, almost absolutely everyone, smiling at the wide-eyed kids. Sometimes I get stuck by red traffic lights, and when I look in my mirror, just one view of your light is richer than all the juices that Vincent could sell in his life. And while we have not found them yet, I know in soul they hear all the answers these junkies will never find. They taunt me with their eloquent nouns that as yet I cannot speak. I hear adjectives that sound something like an old Muslim lady falling asleep next to a Jewish lawyer giggling into his phone. And as I ponder, Vincent with his gentle touch pulls Jenna's hair back from her leaving eyes. And despite all his love for her, I can see that he already knows that his heart won't be enough to keep her here.
Yes, I wrote that when I used to be a tram driver. Anyway, my brother, we've changed to short novels. So if you've got young sons or men in your life that want to read something which might fire them up, get in touch with cafelockdown@gmail.com and we'll see if we can get you a book. But tonight, we're going to talk about this book, Failure Family Law Reform Australia. With my lovely, lovely friend, John Stapleton. Look how handsome he looks.
That's nice of you to say. I should have tidied up for you, mate. The place looks
I live in a bus. I live in a bus. You know? It looks great. Okay, let's jump into it now. If anyone wants to see an interview I did with John, that should be in the description. We did a long interview with him before about who he is. To look at that because it's really worth it. He's worthy of a novel himself. And but anyway, let's get started, John.
Just go on ahead. Does that look all right? Does it look all right?
It looked good before. Anyway, as long as we can hear, that's all that matters. Now, why have you written a book about family law reform? What's you to write that book?
Oh, right. Well, like a lot of people, I won't go into the personal details of it, but like a lot of people, I got churned through the system, and I was just absolutely astonished by what I witnessed in there. I could tell you one little story, for instance, So a friend of mine who was going through it, who'd been highly critical of the family court, rang me up one day at work. You know, I worked at the Australian newspaper, and said, "John, you've just got to come down and have a look at this. It's just mind-blowing what's going on." So I trotted down. I had a reporting pad, even though you can't report on the proceedings of the court, or you can't name people in the court by law, lovely law. which protects the journalists, not the children, of course. It protects the lawyers, I mean. And so, anyway, I'm sitting there with a reporter's pad. It's obvious that, there's a reporter in the thing. And the guy and the incident was the bloke, his son was 15 and had tried to commit suicide. And he had written in an affidavit that he was very sorry not to have been there to be able to comfort his son. And so the lawyer was having a go at him about this. Then the judge steps in and says, "You wanted to be there to watch, didn't you? Didn't you?" And I'm just sitting there like, this is just institutions become sick. That's the judge. He kept going, "You wanted to be there to watch, didn't you? Didn't you? You wanted to be there to watch, didn't you? Didn't you?" And I was just like, I can't believe this. And it was, that was just one of the many, many, many shocking scenes that occur in this court. And people who haven't been through the system or haven't experienced it have no idea how sick that institution has become. It's a kind of pathology. Malfeasance is a normal word for like corruption within an institution, but it's a kind of a psychosis or something within the system as well. And you'll find that sort of really abusive behavior towards litigants to be actually quite common. And there's lots of absolutely shocking stories. I start talking about this book and people go, "Oh, you could write a book about my case. Do you want to hear it?" And I go, "Oh my God,
that's what I'm thinking.
Words on this, So anyway, I became out of the blue in the year 2000. Someone rang me up and said, we're starting a community radio station, which was 2GLF in Liverpool, and it was an ex-copper actually, and said, "And we've heard you're a journalist and you've got some experience and you might be interested." And of course I was, because most blokes who go through this have absolutely no outlet. There's no one to talk to. They're often, other blokes just would rather get over it, mate, or whatever. And certainly socially, a lot of blokes, they just get up and go to work, love their wife, love their kids, go to work. They don't think it, they don't network in a normal sort of way. A lot of their friends and relationships are from from what they do, whether they're fishing or working or playing golf or whatever. And when those events stop, they stop. So they don't have the same sort of networks or support that a lot of women do. And anyway, it absolutely blindsides a lot of them. And so that started off my first session on that was like 18 minutes long, because at that time there was a huge amount of activity all around the world about this. There was Fathers for Justice throwing purple over Buckingham Palace, if you remember that, climbing bridges across Britain. And I've got a mental block, that singer, the world hunger guy, what was his name?
Bob Geldof?
Yes, that's it. Thank you. So he became a hero to the whole fatherhood movement right around the world, because he spoke up very strongly about it because of his breakup with what was her name? Pauline, wasn't it? Was
Pauline,
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the kids with that. So
the
it was
one that went off and married Michael Hutchinson.
Yes. I got involved with it. Yeah.
Paulie Yates.
Yeah. So, but he was very, he wrote very powerfully about it, about how, what had he done wrong, and before his case, which they do advise people to say, before his case, the lawyers advise him, whatever you say, don't say you love your children, because that's seen as an unstable, you'll be unstable, you'll over smother them or whatever. It's just whatever. And
two secs. So you're in court and the lawyers advise you to say that you love your children.
You don't
say you love your children.
Say you love your children, because it'll make you look unstable. Yeah, it's it's a mind blowing.
I'm just taking that down because that's going to be a short.
It's a It's a mind-blowing thing. Why don't I just read
supposed
you?
to say I'm supposed to go in and go, oh, let her have the little shits. Fuck, and I'm so. Oh,
You might as well save yourself $500,000 or whatever in
yeah,
lawyers.
that's right.
People spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on this, all to get the daddy pack, every second weekend and half the holidays if you're lucky. And the
Yeah,
statistics, I'm not sure what the exact statistics at this point in time, but they used to be very clear that about half of the blokes that entered the family court rarely, if ever, saw their children again, might see them once or twice a year. That even though they got orders to see them every fortnight, which isn't very much, it's not enough to maintain any normal relationship. And there is no evidence that that is in the best interest of children. But there's no method to force any compliance. So,
yeah, I've heard that.
because it's an adversarial system and there is a financial incentive, the whole system encourages the worst behaviour from both genders, really, because there's no way to advance your case without making some sort of accusation. It's hard to believe. I'll just read you, if you don't mind, the opening paragraph.
Yeah, you go ahead.
It gives you a sense of it. It remains surprising that the ultra-woke extremist ideology, which is synonymous with the Family Court of Australia, evolved in the land down under. For Australia, founded as a penal colony, has always been associated with anti-establishment sentiment. In the early 1900s, one of the country's most beloved poets, Henry Lawson, wrote, "The clever scoundrels are all outside and the moneyless mugs in jail. Men do 12 months for a mad wife's lies or life for a strumpet's tale. If people knew what the warders know and felt as the prisoners feel, if the people knew, they would storm their jails as they stormed the old Bastille." Henry Lawson, so 103, which was the poem's called 103, and it was written in 1908. And his number in that jail, just in Taylor Square, there, 103. So it was his number. The year 2025 marks the 50th anniversary of the passing of the Family Law Act, the single most impactful and destructive piece of legislation to ever pass the Australian Parliament. In that time, the Family Court has been the subject of dozens of government inquiries and attempts at reform on its road to becoming the single most hated jurisdiction in the country. Far from the helping court its founders told the public they imagined, it has become an enduring symbol of good intentions gone wrong, of the initial idealism of the left turning into a totalitarian nightmare visited upon millions of Australian families, and an enduring example of ideological extremism, political opportunism, and bureaucratic refusal to take seriously the voices of those they are meant to serve. Looked at across a broader reach, an aerial view, so to speak, ultimately the history of the Family Law Act demonstrates how an ideology allowed to flourish in one sacrosanct arena has metastasized across institutions to damage an entire society. So there you go. That's the opening few paths, and away it goes. And
Can I just ask? So, from what you're saying, and from what I've heard from newsmen and family law court barristers, I got a mate who's one of my plays. It's the men are in the worst position usually. The man. Is
oh,
that the?
mind blowing! It's totally mind blowing, and the Labor Party, God bless their rotten socks, has made this considerably worse since they came to power in 2022. So we're in an election year now, of course. So they've been there for 3 years. They passed the 2023 Family Law Amendment Bill and the 2024 Family Law Amendment Bill. Essentially, the first one allowed for any claims of domestic violence to be given total credence. There's no proof needed. And the second one ensured that your property is completely stripped. You already basically had no rights. This was just cementing it. So things like it was rammed through, the 2024 was rammed through with that whole package of bills all at once, 27 passed on one day. That act means that they don't have to use, for instance, the Evidence Act. Isn't required in family law. So no evidence is required.
I can give an analogy of that. There was I have a friend, and his wife accused him of hitting her, which the kids, everyone came out later and it was absolutely never happened. And he didn't know he put in this complaint, so he dropped his kids off in the morning and came back. And about 10 minutes later, the police turned up, and he's in a paddy wagon, taken downtown, processed, and then they bring him back, and he's got half an hour only, to pack up his life and get out of the house. And
that's
that's
exactly
it.
right.
And he
And that's
wasn't
a very
allowed.
common experience.
He wasn't allowed to tell his kids that he was leaving, and he adores his kids. So he wasn't allowed to tell his kids he was leaving, or contact them in any way. Because it was COVID, the court date kept being moved ahead. So he went, I think it was about 6 or 7 months before he had any contact at all with his children. He just vanished from their lives.
That's a
And
very, very common experience, and it's an absolutely shocking one, and it really breaks the bloke's hearts, like completely.
So the ideology is that father is absolutely inconsequential in the children's lives, like an optional extra if he's very, very good.
It's it's appalling. It's hard to believe that this began. The initial proposal by Lionel Murphy in the early 70s, before it became law in 75. The whole idea was that it was to be a helping court, a caring, helping court. And it was through appeals to the High Court that he said it must act like a normal court. But it very quickly became basically a Marxist feminist court, where men are just seen as the abusers, the patriarchy. That truth has absolutely nothing to do with what goes on in that court. The routine abuse of psychiatric evidence in the family reports is just an absolute disgrace. Every lawyer in the country knows this. I mean, you talk to any lawyer, they poo-poo the family court jurisdiction as, and there's no proper lawyers working there. It's all trash basically, and it's been unbelievable. Both sides of Parliament have been guilty of kowtowing to this. It's a weird attempt both to win the women's vote, which it doesn't really, and to appease the the Paleolithic feminists of the Attorney General's Department. Most men would not really. Bettina Arndt, bless her, had wrote a very good piece not long ago about the police whistleblowers who are coming out telling that exact same story that you just told, saying it makes them sick to the gut. And they told one story, the bloke, he's a bit his wife was talking about leaving, and he was a bit, cranky about it all, and he kicked a watering can as he walked out the door, and got in his car and went to work. The cops show up. He's just gobsmacked, and same. Be lucky if he sees
more. Just two more things I heard on the road. One is I interviewed a guy in Gymea, I think, and he ended up in jail for about a month on a possession charge, and he just come back from Nimbin, which is not fair on the cops. And but he said the jail was brand new, and over 60% of the men in there were from these orders where they went to contact the kids, and most of them had been sent text from the wife, like, can you pick up milk, or did you remember what's his name?
Yes.
Day, or something small, and they replied like inconsequential, just something small, and straight away they're thrown into jail.
Oh yes, it's gone completely insane. It's completely feral and incredibly damaging, and a lot of and it simmers away in the whole society. You can talk to you can go anywhere now and hear these tales. How many, I mentioned this book the other day, and said, well, how many men have suicided as a result of this? An awful bloody lot.
Hello.
See it.
Sorry, I'm just testing my mic. The other thing, I meant this when I was doing my play Marooned. The suicide rate amongst men is worse on Saturday afternoons after they've dropped off their kids. That's the most popular suicide day. I think they lose purpose. I used to be a father. I was a provider in the family or half provider, and that's who I was. That's who my identity is. And suddenly, they're on a mate's couch, or they're in some shitty flat.
Yes, not just that.
Yeah.
They get abused in the court by the court process. They have their assets stripped. I'd like to see how some of these women behaved if they lost their social position, their children, their property, a significant amount of their income. They have no income to get their lives back together. They're pursued relentlessly by the child support agency. There used to be a claim that free clients of the child support agency suicided every day. And so we FOI'd the child support agency uphill and down dale because they were claiming their slogan was helping parents manage their responsibilities. And as we said time and time again on Dads on the Air, they can't even count their own dead, much less help anybody, because they wouldn't say how many of their own clients were dying each day. We worked out at that time, and it's probably worse now, it was about 12 a day. Now, not all of those are suicides, obviously, but that's a fairly healthy cohort, that divorce age bracket, which all the money goes to youth suicide because it's fashionable, or it arouses sympathy. Separated men arouse no sympathy, and but that's where the problems are. And it's just amazing.
Well, to be the devil's advocate, a lot of relationships, not all of them, but a healthy portion of relationships when they break up can be acrimonious. And
well, of course, you don't break up if you're not getting on. Really.
Yeah, that's right. So what you're saying is that when it gets to court, it's no longer a fair playing field, and the rights of the kids are really not taken into account because it's more just attack on the men. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Well, I think it's worse than that. There was a guy the other day. There was a story it's mentioned in the book. His wife died when the child was about 3 years old. The kid was now 8 or 9. He complains to the school that she's being picked on. So suddenly, school teachers being shown, so no man could be looking after this young girl. So Child Protective Services steps in, another nightmare organisation from all reports, and the kid's whisked off. Told she's an Aboriginal. There was no Aboriginality in the family, but told she's an Aboriginal, and it took him something like a year to get the kids back. And the kids going, "I want to see Daddy. I want to go home." Blah blah blah, and they wouldn't listen to her, wouldn't listen to him. It's a poisonous arena which has become sicker and sicker as the years have passed. And it's an absolute disgrace. It was so interesting those early years when I became involved in 2000, because there were a lot of police, ex-police, involved in the fatherhood movement in those early days. And I think it was partly because they've dedicated their whole life to what they see as doing the right thing, protecting the community. But when it comes to them, they just get done over like everybody else. And, it's just... There's some great books about this.
But we're yours. So I'm just going to read out some things. So Professor Augusto Zimmermann, former Law Reform Commissioner of Western Australia, I strongly recommend this book, which compellingly demonstrates that the family law system allows false accusations to destroy innocent people and alienate good parents from their children. Stapleton must be congratulated for providing compelling evidence that the Australian family law system requires a complete overhaul. And G. Lawrence DeMarco, Executive Manager, International Council for Men and Boys. Family law reform is urgently needed to address systemic issues failure, Family Law Reform Australia highlights this with a compelling narrative, exposing the need for reform through powerful examples of real life justice. And Warwick Marsh for Dads for Kids, Failure, Family Law Reform Australia is a brilliant, comprehensive book that highlights the havoc the family law and child support systems have inflicted on the families and children of our nation. Pretty powerful reviews.
Yeah, nice. Some people might remember Warwick Marsh from those late night ads of Dads Need Kids. You remember any of those on TV? I don't know. You do, but they ran
I know
a whole
Augusto. I know Augusto Zimmermann. Yeah.
He's a lively lad, isn't he? He's very good. Yeah, very smart. I wrote an earlier version of this book, which was just out in 2010. I did about 10 years on that radio program, Dad's on the Air, and work let me do it. You know, I had a main job as a mainstream journalist, but they let me do this, I think, because it was so I'd stop pestering them with stories. They were just unbelievable stories that just spill out everywhere on this. There was one guy who he was driving to pick up his kids. No, he was driving with his kids. No, he was driving to pick up his kids, had a car accident. His best mate was killed in the car accident. He ends up in hospital, and the wife refuses to let him see the kids, didn't see the kids for years. And he was just begging them, and he'd been on going to pick him up for a visit, you know, and she wouldn't take him to the hospital. There's another horror story. There's so many horror stories with this. It's mind blowing. There was one. We did a story when they were talking about imprisoning parents if they fell behind in their child support. That I did a story called "Problem Parents Doing Time," which was published in the Australian, and we had really full documentation on all of this. And one of those cases was this guy, heartbroken, as so many fathers are, by what had happened and not seeing his children, and completely impoverished by the rapacious demands of the child support agency, and his sister, who was just basically crying on the phone when she was telling me the story. We had to see all the documentation, but she was saying he'd just been to the doctor. The doctor was saying he seems better now. He's not as depressed as he was. The child support agency rings up and says, "You've overpaid by $800. Oh, can I have the money back?" No, you have to either gift the money to the mother, or we will take the money. You can't have it back. He goes, walks out to his shed, drinks this poison that you drink in the shed, and it took him something like 12 days to die, because it was the poison that eats your stomach out. Just some of these stories they're just absolutely horrific, and our politicians have done absolutely nothing about it. Every time there's been something like
why is that, John? I mean, there's so many politicians, men. Why is that? Are they scared of the other side lobbying against them? I mean, why aren't they defending? And I'm not saying defending men at the cost of women, but why can't there? Surely there has to be some common sense approach that could.
My theory, and it's a curious thing, really, because you've got the Conservatives who are supposedly pro-family but have just double-crossed everybody, and Labor. You expect Labor to be, lunatic, anti-male, because that's their ideology. But my theory is that both sides have become frightened of the monster they have created. There's an absolute armada of hundreds of taxpayer-funded feminist academics. There's literally thousands of women's groups, domestic violence groups, legal groups, community groups, etc., etc., etc. It's a massive industry, massive industry built up, made worse by Julia Gillard when she brought domestic violence into the Family Law Act, which means basically that whole thing, the bloke goes to work, the woman rings up the coppers and says, I'm frightened, and suddenly the cops are showing up at his work. You can't go home. That's the end of it. You can't go, but it's my house. It doesn't matter, mate. And
can I tell you something really strange though? I'm helping a young woman called Kiana, who had she took her single mum, took her child to hospital because of blood in his stool. The hospital in Perth said he's got leukemia. We've got to start treatment. She said, "Can I wait until the morning? I want to get a second opinion." And they took the child away, and she finally got back. Then they've taken both her children away now. She just looks like she's to get her back. The magistrate's going. They've got no right to take the children away. But this is the weird thing. She was in Cairns, where she is now, or Townsville, one of those, and she went to the hospital because she knew her child had an appointment at the hospital. When she got there, the children were in the care of African men. So they've taken it off their mother. This is the DCP, and they've put her in the care of these African guys.
Sudanese immigrants.
It doesn't make any sense from a humanistic point of view. And that's so the women are competent too on that side. But what I'm saying,
absolutely, yeah, it's not.
The state seems to be becoming brutal.
Oh, really? Yeah, brutal. It's a really brutal industry. You look at the Indigenous. Just as many Indigenous kids are being removed now as when they had those royal commissions all those years ago.
In the Stone generation.
Yeah, all of that. It's bad or worse now than ever. I know someone who worked at docks and they were minding kids with her sister, and the government moved in and took all those kids, and they perfectly, not only did she, the woman taking care of the kids, work for the department. It's insane what's happened, and it's an ideological contempt for the nuclear family. It's a lot of it is that, really. I think it's that the nuclear family is an old oppressive institution. Blah blah blah. The only way to truth.
What's their? Sorry, John. Finish. I'm just wondering what their argument is for it. What's their argument? Why do they believe they're doing the right thing? The court and all the others. What what's their?
Do they really believe they're doing the right thing? I doubt it very, very much. I don't think anyone in that system could really, truly believe they're doing the right thing. The only people who are saying they're doing the right thing are people who are paid for by the system or benefiting the system.
So the system is bigger than everyone, and everyone's just adapting to it, rather than a visionary politician coming along trying to go, let's change all this.
And also there is a psychopathology within the court itself. Power breeds a kind of sickness within the person itself. So you have that sort of judicial sickness, which leaks out. They have no idea of the consequences of what they're doing, and they treat other people's children in a way they would be horrified if someone treated their own children like that. That's partly it. It's a strange thing. If I could just call up this thing, one of the ideological justifications for it was
sure.
I can just do that. Hang on. Where is the damn thing? Oh God, I meant to get all this working.
Look at this story. Why are you doing this? Diane Barnett. They allow my granddaughter to stay with her drug addict mother and haven't had contact with dad for more than 4 years. We've been fighting her in court for 2 years, and she just refuses what the judge says. That's the other thing, isn't it? If the woman refuses to do what she's been told to do. There's no comeuppance.
No. There's a lot of women fall foul of this system as well. It's I did women's studies in the 1970s, being a good progressive kind of bloke, did women's studies at university, and I was the only male in there, I might say. But, they're now called gender studies, but back then they were called women's studies. And it was, there's so much history to it. This is just a personal reflection from when I was doing philosophy in the 70s at university. Each year, one of our lazier professors would set an essay for Shulamith Firestone's The Dialectics of Sex, The Case for Feminist Revolution, also first published in 1970, along with The Female Eunuch. The basic tenet of the book was for true liberation, all traces of the patriarchy needed to be excised from women's lives. Firestone described the biological family as tyranny, her particular innovation being to include gender in traditional Marxist analysis of social power structures. In the opening paragraphs, Firestone wrote, The Dialectics of Sex, that bloody book. I've read it 3 years in a row because he set the same essay every year. If there were another word more all-embracing than revolution, we would use it. To so heighten one's sensitivity to sexism presents problems far worse than the black militants' new awareness of racism. Feminists have to question not just all Western culture, but the organisation of culture itself, and further, even the very organisation of nature. Many women give up in despair. Others continue strengthening and enlarging the movement. Their painful sensitivity to female oppression existing for a purpose, eventually to eliminate it. Fast forward 50 years to the 2020s, and Firestone might as well have been the Prime Minister of Australia, her beliefs having lurched out of the academy to become all-pervasive in the nation's institutions. Raised on a diet of this sort of rhetoric and now in senior and powerful positions in the bureaucracy, graduates of the 1970s saw themselves as righting historical wrongs. But the feminism of the day, once seen as so cutting edge and supported by many men, became, in its playing out in family courts, social welfare departments, domestic violence shelters, and all the billions of dollars worth of supporting bureaucracies, a shock to many of its original male supporters, particularly if by one twist of fate or another they became a separated dad. So, it's just unbelievable. The whole thing is unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. You've really got to there must be some sort of route to here that you just wonder sometimes how we got to here. Did we get to here because lobbyists and activists were passionately working while the rest of us were just watching the footy and thinking she'll be right, sort of like osmosis?
I think it's also because that educated. How did climate change? I mean, we're sitting through a very cold damn summer. It was meant to be a long, hot summer, and we were all going to burn to death. But I'm sitting here in a jacket, freezing cold, and everyone around me is complaining how cold it is. Where are you, Melbourne or something? You south?
No, I just crossed the New South Wales border, so I'm just over the border near Cobram somewhere, and so I'm next to. Actually, I don't know where the fuck I am, to be honest. But there's a
must be somewhere near Auckland.
Philosophy of my life. There's a we seem to be such a balanced people, such a fair people on whole. That's what we crave, fairness, fair play, it's part of our curricula. And yet you hear, and I've heard these stories from barristers that just terrify you. You know what I mean? And it's,
and it gets no play in or very little play in the media. It gets one story I wrote. They were saying they got more response to that than any story they'd ever published. But so it's a huge live issue in the community. The history of this dating from the 70s, there were concerns about it really early on. I know what I wanted to say was that, I did an early version of this book, Chaos at the Crossroads, it was called, about the 2000 to 2010 family law reform efforts. And then when I started doing it, and I just wanted to tidy this up, I thought I'd just do an introduction and a conclusion and tidy up that form of book, and I'd be right. But in fact, it ended up being much more complex than that. And I realised when I was, hey, it's the 50th anniversary of the Family Law Act. That's good timing. And so that's how this book came about, really, was I was just rewriting an earlier version and then realised it was the 50th anniversary. It's
wow,
mind-blowing.
Keep. I'm just going to bring up the link. I've got the link here for the book, so I'll put it up in the. What do you think's the solution, John? How do you think? Do you have any solutions?
I think the Swedish really just default joint custody. Stop slinging mud at everybody. If there was the whole DV industry has been blown completely out of control. I don't know where they get all these victims from. No Australian women I ever meet will take a step backwards. They're all perfectly capable of taking care of themselves. So it's become it's become a moral panic, what used to be known as mass hysteria, now termed moral panic in society, and that has created its own problems. And as the government pours more millions, Albo just announced, what was it, 3.7, 4.5, whatever, more billions of dollars into this whole arena. And it was his thing that he was going to eradicate domestic violence from Australia, which is sadly and eerily reminiscent of Bob Hawke saying he was going to eradicate child poverty, created the Child Support Agency, which is one of the most dysfunctional institutions in Australia and is really a disgrace to the Australian public service to this day. So it really is a case of good intentions gone badly wrong and left in the hands of lawyers, of course, who are all making a fortune out of this. We're talking now about a multi-billion-dollar industry, which is funded both by the taxpayer and by, desperate litigants. So
every man and woman I've spoken to who've been through the system talk of the fortunes they lost.
Absolutely. People lose houses. Some people start off as millionaires and they just basically lose absolutely everything. And you'll find sort of stories time and again. They just destroy perfectly productive, happy people, and it just vacuums all their possessions, all their houses, their income. The Child Support Agency still has the same, or essentially the same percentages as the Bolsheviks had. They introduced the first child support schemes to fund their war against the nuclear family. We've got the same here. Basically a century later. I just don't. The solution, I think, is essentially the Swedish one. You just have default joint custody, which was the original intention, interestingly, of the Family Law Act, that there would be automatic joint custody and that the only role of the court would be to assist separating couples to reach a non-acrimonious solution to any of what they were going through. And
so do they go to a court or to a hearing or something, or a counseling session? How do they do it in Sweden?
I think, as I understand it, there is a tribunal or a court that oversees this, but essentially because it's in law, people make a lot of their own arrangements. That there isn't. Here you have a huge financial incentive. You get child support, you get the property, you'll get 90% or more of the property by simply making an accusation without any proof. 1, you get the bloke out of the house. 2, he has to pay child support. 3, you get all the property. Away you go, and you get all that sort of social status of the poor beleaguered single mother, and you don't have to work for the average separated mum. I don't know if these statistics are current, but they certainly were accurate, was about 12 years. They'd spent about 12 years on welfare after separation, which is another very poor use of personnel and of the public. So it's it's a bloody sad, rotten, horrible mess, the whole damn thing, I can tell you now. It's the child support agency is another whole arena. The child support agency is one of the primary drivers of unemployment in Australia. Many fathers find working while paying what they rightly perceive as draconian levels of child support pointless. There was a story which got front page coverage in the Canberra Times of a guy who had 3 or 4 kids. He was paying 86% of his pay in child support and so on, and he suicided in his garage, clutching a child support agency letter, and the agency claimed to be treating him fairly. You can lose. There is no point going to work if you're going to get not only just heavily taxed, which we are, but then you've got 36% or something on top of that. And if you get into debt, it compounds. There's no point going to work. So it's creating a huge body of extremely disillusioned people, both men and women. It does women no good to benefit from lying either. And a lot of these cases are false. And the other side of the argument,
do you think lawyers encourage the women to be?
Of course
I've heard from women that the lawyers themselves push the women to be far more aggressive than what they want to be. I have heard that, but have you heard evidence of that?
Oh yes, absolutely. The first step is to get a domestic violence order, which is very, very easy to get now. Yeah. Like ludicrously easy. You don't have to have any evidence. Once upon a time, if there was genuine domestic violence, there would be a police report, black eyes or a hospital visit or something, some evidence. Yeah. But now the definition of domestic violence has been expanded so much that it's become basically meaningless. Any normal disagreement can be described as domestic violence. One was, he overwhelmed me with his intelligence. It's just become ludicrous. Absolutely.
I just read out this, John. This is from Fritz Batsky. Hey, Fritz. I asked for receipts from child support. I knew the money was going to alcohol and drugs. I stated that it is a legal transaction. I want.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, it must be. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I just saying, Fritz Batsky here said, I asked for receipts from child support because I knew the money was going to alcohol and drugs. I stated that is a legal transaction. I wanted receipts. I had to buy my son's clothes when I had time with him. Very confused. Now, this is not all relationships are like this, but this is a problem I hear time and time again. I know Damien Richardson went through it, and it really changed him,
Oh, it really does change people. They have no faith in the government because both sides of politics have colluded in this. In 2003, John Howard launched a long overdue inquiry into family law, which garnered huge support from both women and men. His ratings went up. He wasn't all that likable a character for many people, but his ratings went up. It depends on how you see it. Some people still think Howard was a great icon of the Conservatives, but other people think he's a nasty little gnome, Well, I have my own views, but never mind. But he started this off and got a real boost in the polls from it, um, and just fiddle-assed around for year after year after year, holding more and more and more. He could take us all into Iraq in 5 seconds flat because it suited him and suited the alliance with America, which is the only reason we're involved. And but he couldn't do a decent thing like fix this diabolically bad system, which everybody knows. You talk to lots of people. I've talked to lots of people. That the stories that would flow through Dads on the Air, which I was involved in, still available, but it's a more soft, cozy thing. We used to be really out there, People were good. People, and they had every right to be frightened of the court. There's one guy who wrote on the internet, no, he wrote a letter to the court, as I remember rightly, saying it should be taken out and dumped on a garbage tip. He had 3 federal police at his door. Those sorts of things.
Wow.
The court had a really very fearsome reputation and is still seen as a very unfriendly, extremely bureaucratic. The Liberals took it into the federal court supposedly as an attempt to make it into a more normal court, and now it costs like 4 times what it used to cost to just file for divorce, and is extremely legalistic and takes absolutely forever, and just mind-blowing. And no, Labor doesn't want to raise this issue because they've really double-crossed their traditional working class base, who are absolutely destroyed by this. I mean, if you've got multiple properties and the kids are in private schools and everything, and you've got a good education yourself, you tend to reach some amicable divide the houses, it doesn't really impact. Where it really impacts is in the lower socioeconomic groups, where they're just scrabbling and screaming at each other and fighting over small, very small things, or a house or whatever. And I just think the absolute failure to address this issue for so many years is a real shame. It's a real failure of democracy, as I write. It's a complete failure of democracy.
Well, considering the suicide rate amongst fathers, and it is a difficult issue, but considering the suicide rate amongst fathers, the detrimental effect on children from having to go through themselves and seeing these battles going on for years, I do think that there could be a better way, even if it was as simple as like a community of elders that you went, the parents sat down, or psychologists, and see if they can talk it out and just some reason done. You know what I mean? It's
it's also extremely racist legislation. Muslims, for instance, don't have this issue at all. They won't be seen near the family court because it's codified basically within the culture and their tradition that in the they're very pro-marriage and possible stay together and so on and so forth. But if in the unfortunate circumstance, the child stays with the mother until they're 7 and then is brought up by the father after that. Same with the Sudanese, who have a very different family structure to the nuclear family. Basically, the mother gives birth, and after the first year, the child is brought up by other members of the family, and that's normal to them. So
this is an interesting comment. My ex didn't pay his child support. Tax time, CSP took the money from him and kept it. I never saw a penny. I've heard these stories too. There's someone else the same thing. So it's no one's benefiting really, in a way. Except. It's. I admire you for having the kahunas to write it. How long did it take you to write?
Well, I'd half written it, in 2010, and then I came back to it, and this was several months. I thought it would be really easy, and it turned out to be really, really. It took months. Really, I'd get up at midnight and work all the way through the night, and that sort of thing. Really, sort of intense, focused work. Here's one section which just sums up this racist, sexist nature of the whole thing.
Yeah, sure.
If you don't mind. Oddly, it was a politician who mounted one of the most lucid and vehement attacks on Australia's family law system, Peter Lewis, who served for a time as the Speaker for the South Australian Parliament. He articulated well the reputation of the court in the broader community. The claims were made in the context of yet another inquiry report. There's been over 100 changes to the legislation and countless... Oh, shit, I pressed the wrong button. Sorry. Here we go.
That's all right.
The claims were made in the context of yet another inquiry report, but indicate well in plain language the reputation of the court. The family court system, and quote, the family court system and the public played servants in the processes which hang off it are racist, sexist, abusive, biased, crook, and often criminal in their impact on too many parents who have to go through it. They are racist because too often they assume Anglo-Saxon cultural mores. They are sexist because too often they assume that a woman will be a better parent than a man. They are abusive because too often they assume that a man should earn the money. Sorry.
Okay, Dave.
Hang on. Dear, oh dear. I don't know if I can do this now. Bloody thing. Sorry, because it's going over a page. So.
That's right.
But I'll just try once more. I'll try once more. Yeah, it was a good summary of it all. That was all. I don't know how to do this. It's all right. I'll give up. But
all right, no worries.
No worries. Sorry about that. It was
now the book is published on Amazon, and that's really interesting. Now you're highly acclaimed
on Amazon, and you can order it. The digital copy is available for pre-order on Amazon now. The hard copy will be available for a pre-order on Amazon very shortly, and then the delivery date would be the 28th of Feb. You can also get it on Booktopia and Angus and Robertson and Apple Books and all the other major online outlets, or you can go and ask your local bookshop to order a copy in, and hopefully the library distribution service will also pick it up and distribute it, although you never know with them. They can be a bit leery about things which are political, but we were Dads on the Air had a very interesting history, I have to say. Do you want me to read a bit more of bits and pieces?
Yeah, sure, go. Yeah, go.
Despite the Attorney General Lionel Murphy's vision of a helping court when he brought no fault divorce to Australia in 1975, cooperative parenting after divorce was rarely encouraged. He may well have been of good motive. It didn't end that way. As one of our guests on Dads on the Air, the greatly admired Australian historian John Hurst wrote in his compelling book Kangaroo Court, far from being a helping institution, as the years rolled by, the court became both feared and hated. He said, "I cannot see the way by which the court can be rescued. Until there is a fundamental change, it will continue to give offence." Hurst became a great friend of the Dads on the Air, came into the studio when he was visiting Sydney from Melbourne. He wrote Australian Federalism and all these other books, which none of us will probably ever read, but he was a hugely admired academic historian. He used to come out to dinner with myself and the kids, When family court judges talk piously of the caring court, I wish they could hear the roar of pain that their piety has caused, he wrote.
Wow. That's beautiful.
He was really, in language, surprising for
I've got a question here for you. How does the current cost of living impact the relationship breakdowns outcomes? Do you know?
I would imagine that it's adding a huge amount of stress, basically, because people can't get ahead. Everybody's running to stand still, and that produces all sorts of stress. As a the normal thing that we grew up in, which was that Dad went to work and Mum stayed home. That's long gone, which it's fine by a lot of people, but no, it's enormous stress. It creates enormous stress. You know perfectly well if you've been working all day and you get home. It's stressful. Bringing up kids is stressful, and bringing up kids as a single parent is extremely stressful. I don't know why the court it hasn't adapted to this modern era where both men and women are working. It still assumes that the woman is at home and that the father's off at work, and that the kids are better off, in that single. There is no single parent. There is no proof that the style of orders that the family court makes is in the best interest of children, as is so often claimed. It's just.
I have to say, too, at the same time, I say this in defence. I've met lots of single mothers. They do a hell of a job bringing up kids in this era by themselves and stuff. It's
sure.
I know there are women out there who are caustic, and there are men out there, because this is how it goes. It's not like they're good, they're bad. So it is a quagmire of it's just a quagmire. It's just a quagmire, really, of human emotions caught up in egos and fighting. But I still think, though, that what this new system does, I know with a few of the friends that I've had have gone through it, it allows those who have the propensity to be psychopathic or narcissistic the tools they need to destroy their partner or their ex-partner.
Oh, absolutely.
If they want to do it. You know what I mean? If you say we were married salesmen and even though you're the prettiest, but I'll just claim it, you know what I mean? That if I wanted to destroy you, I can just make a false claim. And then even if it gets proven to be false, nothing. No perjury charges, nothing. It's fine. That's what Jimmy and Gil are brought in, right?
I'm mates with this ex-policeman down at the dog park where I walk my dogs, and the claims were made against him, and he's that he was harassing her outside the house, and he said, I was on a police job 300 k's away. Here's the evidence, blah 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 blah. And they said, and the court said, well, it doesn't matter. She believes it, and that's the thing.
She believes it.
Yeah, she believes that he's harassing her, so that's enough. It's
so we give the incentive to create great battles. There's incentives for the woman to be aggressive in how she does it because she's going to win, and the lawyer probably pushing it because they know that's an easy win, and the poor lawyers, the men, I know from all the friends I've gone through, they just end up being penniless. Lose everything just to the lawyers, and end up usually with nothing,
Absolutely.
And the other thing too, which was really interesting, since I've met fathers, so they lose everything, then they've got to rent or something again. They've got to find a rental, and then look after their kids, so they can't work on the weekend, and yet the weekend is often where they make enough money. So the fathers are actually only working Monday to Friday. And so there's, there doesn't seem to be any just common sense into it.
Yeah. I mean, the child support agency, if you owe money, blocks you from going overseas. Now, some of the best paid jobs, you can make very good money in Dubai or something working as a teacher.
Yeah, great point.
But they're not allowed to leave the country to do those sort of jobs, which is another insanity. Second wives are another huge cohort who are very badly done by, because
Mm.
they often, you've got those blended families, and the bloke, they just see the bloke being absolutely destroyed, and they've got, they often go on and have another kid or something with someone else, but
Mm.
kid doesn't count in the formulas, and so they're absolutely impoverished by the brutality of this insane system. I really don't see any other alternative, but joint custody. You work it out and remove all the financial incentives, which are the welfare payment, the child support payments, and the property. All those incentives should be taken out. Humans are humans, and you're in a time of crisis. You are going to do whatever you can to achieve some sort of stability. That's normal. You can't really be blamed for taking advantage of whatever the system offers. If you can walk across the border into America and make a better life for you and your kids, well, you're going to do it. You can't blame the individual for taking an opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Interestingly enough, just on another sort of slight, there's so many different aspects to this, but you would swear there was never a fatherhood movement in Australia if you looked at the internet these days.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. Very hard to find.
Very hard to find. The Shared Parenting Council of Australia, which had a huge amount of documentation, that's gone. The Family Law Web Guide, which had a huge amount of material, that's gone. The Lone Fathers website, which had a huge amount of documentation, and people's personal stories and so on, that's gone. There was newsletters and so on where people shared all sorts of stuff. That's gone. A lot of this, you would Dads in Distress, there's another one, that's gone, and the websites have gone. You would swear there'd been a deliberate effort to eradicate this story from the Australian history.
Well, I've got a comment here from New South Welsh and Women for Equality. Thank you for covering this taboo subject, which is destroying our men, boys, and families. My family have been and are still stuck in the family law roundabout. My son and I are still alienated from my grandson 5 years in, due to 4 agreed court orders being manipulated, so that every time my son was to be introduced, we had to go back to court, and many more months and money spent on child wasted, as orders are not enforceable. Do you know, I did this play, I did this selling my book, but this play here was about 3 young guys lost at sea, and in the end they questioned, want to come back, because what's for here as a man, you know what I mean? But one of them in it, he talks about how his father ended up in jail, and they say, how do what he did? He goes, I sent him a text, and one of the guy goes, well, what did you put in? And he replied, he ended up, the lawyers saw it, mother saw it, lawyers saw it, he ended up in jail for a month. And one of the other characters in the boat goes, well, what did you put in the text? And it takes him ages to reply, and he's been a really key character up to now, and then he just whispers, I miss you, what he put in the text. This is from a real story. But I was watching the men in the audience as it was done. You know what I mean? They were coming up afterwards. The men were more affected than even some of the young guys by seeing how they've been valued as fathers, basically hamstruck. It's extraordinary. An extraordinary amount of pain out there that a lot of carrying. You know what I mean? Because, a lot of men think, people say, talk, but a lot of men don't talk, because I feel they find stoicism in trying to make pain stop them and not pass it on to other guys that they think have their own problems. So that's it. It's a really strange time to be a man now, because who are we as men? What's our purpose in society? It's really difficult. Here's my mate David Listen. For a decent father to be denied access to his offspring, or limited time, be it fortnightly, is inevitably going to take its toll on the father's mental health. Throwing character assassination, that father is all at sea. Agreed, David.
Correct.
It's
I'll tell you another little
Yeah.
story. There are so many stories here, but there was this Indian character, Indian guy who I got to know quite well because he was so outraged about all this. This got a little bit of coverage in the ethnic press, but no coverage in the mainstream at all. And so it was a complicated thing where his daughter was about 13, I think, at the time, and had been living with him. Oh, I meant to turn this freaking phone off and I can't work out how to do it. There's no off button on my phone. How does that work? Anyway, so the mother had gone back to India, and the court ordered him to write to his parents to see whether or not they would take care of the child if he was to send the child over to India to see the mother who was unstable. Could they stay with the grandparents? So he wrote to his own parents in English, explaining the situation. He gets back before the judge. The judge jails him because he wrote to his parents in English and not Hindi, and he went to jail for something like 3 months, I think it was. Now, Australians come from a more convict background, and they're all bastards anyway. But for an Indian to be sent to jail is like the biggest social disgrace you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
Pain on the family and everything. And as he pointed out to everybody who would listen, his parents, his father had 2 master's degrees in English and was an English professor, and of course he wrote to him in English, but that wasn't good enough for the court. These insane
make any sense.
Makes no sense at all. These things go, and you talk to anyone where you've been around the country, you talk to all sorts of. A lot of these things make no sense. Like the amount of money that Orwell would have spent in trying to get a reasonable outcome. There's no sanity to any of this. And it just goes round and round and round in these shocking circles. It's just mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing.
That is insane. That is insane.
I know, completely insane.
That really is. That's just insane. You can't figure it.
Sorry to laugh, but I mean, what can you do? The things.
No, it's a laughable thing because it's insane. It doesn't make any sense.
And you can bet now, as Bettina pointed out, most men would have no idea that the Labor Party has just stripped what very few rights they had, just basically stripped by this recent legislation, that it's got even worse than it already was. I think historically John Howard had an opportunity to fix his system. There was a lot of public support in the early 2000s to reform this poisonous system, and he just blew it, And there was Albo's now something like 12% behind in the male vote. For very good reason. Well,
do you know what he's done now, which is hilarious? He's asking Daniel Andrews for help.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, I know. Unbelievable.
Which just goes to show to me just how out of touch Albanese is.
Oh, I mean, bizarre. Well, they were great mates at university.
I know they're great mates, but he's so toxic. You know what I mean? He's like, I just can't believe
the whole country hates Daniel Andrews, not just Victorians.
He's not around the world. He's just seen as this hated man.
Hateful man. What about Shane Patton, the policeman that was running around arresting pregnant women in their own home and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, beating up women and beating up old ladies and shooting people on the Shrine of Remembrance. And
I love Sky News managed to talk about Shane Patton going without mentioning why he was so hated, which of course was COVID.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but they managed to think, unrest in the streets and everything. So good old Sky managed to cover that without even mentioning the sort of diabolical abuses that occurred during the COVID era. So, it's both sides.
I just want to hear him. I just want to hear his justifications for everything I've seen him do. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, running around lying, safe and effective, and all the other lies these people told. I think it's really poisoned Australian politics, all this. We're told this was sold to us by Labor politicians as simple, safer and simple family law. You see those phrases all the time. This is safer and simpler, which is a total and complete lie. But cheap and reliable, and cheap and reliable, safe and effective. Safe and safer.
The whole thing's insane. We're just living in this world of lies now, and
Yeah.
the only ones that seem to get in trouble are those who are looking for the truth. How dare you? What are you thinking? We can't publish this. This is the truth. Haven't you got the memo? We live in lies now. That's where we live. Comforting lies.
Well, I find a paragraph or two to close off on.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to do it. Lovely interview, my friend.
Oh, look at you.
We've got another one because you've got another book coming out, but we'll talk about that later in another interview.
I'm not sure. All right. The adversarial nature of family law encouraged false accusations from the earliest days of its formation. Changes which have set in since the turn of the millennium ensures there is no consequence for making false accusations, at least on the mother's part, and has simply made the situation worse. In its playing out in practice, no fault divorce in an adversarial system simply meant all the fault was placed on dads. In a he said, she said jurisdiction, the words of fathers were routinely depicted as the voices of the patriarchy. If they attempt to correct the record, they are readily described as using the family law system to abuse their former partner. Family law became little more than a criminal assault on half the population, a justification for stripping men of their assets, their dignity, and their purpose in life. The high suicide rate among separated men was of no concern to the perpetrators. A caring court in the hands of lawyers. What were they thinking? They've been lying to you ever since. There you go.
Yeah. You try to see, you just try to find the humanity in it, the decent humanity, the fair play. It seems to be missing everywhere. There's,
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Anyway. Thanks for coming on. It's a joy to have you on. You look terrific.
Oh, I wish that was true.
Thanks for publishing some of my stories. I'm really honoured that you like them.
I've been a bit exhausted. I'd run some more. You've been writing some great stuff, Michael. Some of the silence of it all.
Thanks,
greatest stupor. Yeah, it's history will look back on you as one of the great writers of this era. They really will. And you've
I don't know about that, but that's but it's just.
But you've written some really
but it's
terrible stuff.
It's out here. It's almost like being a war correspondent now. There's so much death and carnage and this strange veneer, which is don't talk about it. We don't talk about it.
The great silence.
But my son just dropped dead, and I don't know why. That's all right. We'll cremate him. Let's just move on. Everything's fine. Go back to work. It's just insane. It's like, I think a lot of people feel like Jack Nicholson in The Cuckoo's Nest. I think that's sort of where they are, because you realise that a lot of the people who are not talking or not speaking or trying to make it go away, they're aware. The Cuckoo's Nest. They're voluntarily a part of this. They could actually say no, but they don't. For whatever reason, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to let you go, brother. I'll send you this.
Very good.
Yeah, and I'm heading up north, so stay in contact. I'm going to pop in.
All right, do. Yeah, that'd be great. Be good to see you.
I look forward to it.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just going to put the link up.
That's just
where
for the
I put it.
The hard copy will be up there very shortly. It's just a process.
Yeah, it is hard. There it is. There. journalist John Stapleton family. Oh, it's actually got another name. I've missed out the thing, but it's there. There's
family. Well, that's all right.
But they're coming to the book there.
The digital version, the hard copy will be up shortly, and yep, that'll be great. Thank you very much.
No
Michael.
worries. No worries, John. Take care. Have a good night. See you guys.
Bye.
See you.
But wait, can you hear our children crying? They're calling from all over this land. They're glaring at today's page.